Chapter 3. Their eyes locked. If you ever need me. I know I shouldn't say that after New York, but I have to. You have your family here with us, and I belong to that family even if I'm the wife. If you ever need me, call me Jonas, Alex whispered into Jonas's mouth and pulled her lips away. You can't lead me on or lie to me, Alex. I know what you're doing. You and I know that there is no one like my brother, and there can be no one else but him for you. Even if you'd met me first, then when he came along, you would have left me to be with him. Alex's brown eyes brightened, and a gigantic smile crossed her lips. What Jonas had said was the truth, and he knew Alex was trying to make him feel better about himself. Where are you going, Jonas? I need to know. Someone should know. Have you contacted your doctors? Jonas never answered. He rose, attempting to head for the door after giving Alex one last closed smile, but Alex placed her hand on his wrist and gave it a tug. Don't go far and call or text. Maybe even FaceTime with me. When you get where you're going, I'd like to know if you're okay, and where you decided to move to. I'm thinking about Florida. Hitchhike to Miami. Maybe take a bus and see how the other half lives. I know how the other half lives, and I would caution against it. Why don't you take one of the cars? You will need it where you're going, Alex cautioned. I have money to buy a car if I wanted, more money than I will ever spend or need. Max placed money in my account. He still thinks, if he gives me all my inheritance, that I'll blow it on a pretty woman. Jonas aimed a wide smile at Alex. She knew that Max knew Jonas almost as well as she did. Max had to get Jonas out of more trouble involving women than either one of them cared to think about. I let my license expire, Jonas said, placing his hands in his jean pockets when he was nervous and didn't want to answer any more questions. Alex knew that Jonas hadn't let his license expire. That was just to placate her, and he would do as he set out to do no matter what Max had said, or what she warned him not to do. It was time she stopped coddling him, she thought, and let Jonas be Jonas. Now that was a scary thought. Do you think Florida is a good place to move to, since it's not far from New York? Alex questioned, not wanting to say goodbye where she felt this time she wouldn't see him again. It's far enough. It's crowded and I can get lost there. I've been to San Francisco and made a mess out there too. I've just about made a mess everywhere I've gone. I'm getting older now. If I can't be marriage material, then maybe I can be a good father, or at least slow down and try. Jonas's mouth tightened, and he bit his bottom lip, and his eyes wandered. The therapy appears to be working, and with the meds I'm on, I think I'm stabilized. We'll see. You'll make it, Jonas. You'll be fine. I have faith in you. You might be the only one. Max has given up on me. Don't give up on me, Alex. You're all I have. We are your family. My children and Max and I. You will always have us. Jonas took a few steps and leaned over, and kissed Alex on the forehead, as if he couldn't leave, afraid to make that step that would take him out of the security of Max's home. Pulling away, Jonas stared down at Alex and held on to her hand as if it was connected to his. He didn't want to let go. Maybe he thought that if he did, it would sever the ties and dissolve the feelings Alex had for him. Forever. He would never forget her, and how they'd bonded because of their crazy love-hate-love relationship. His love for her, and her hate for the things she offered to do for him in the name of love. Chapter 4. The weather had been ruthless all day and night with the wind, rain, and snow, but now that Jonas was leaving Montana, it still didn't let up with the wind and snow. Jonas knew driving had been out of the question anyway, and since there was a local bus station in the nearby town, he opted to take the bus. Alex's driver dropped him at the bus station inside a local store. After buying a ticket to Miami, Jonas boarded, placed his backpack overhead, and settled back in his seat to watch a movie. No doubt that he would watch many before the bus pulled into Miami. The seat next to him had been empty, and he thought that he'd be able to relax without having to talk to anyone. He didn't like small talk, the usual about the weather and his name. Maximilian had made a name for himself with all the land he owned and the ski resorts. If you were traveling through Montana, you'd see that Blackstone name imprinted everywhere. Just when the bus was due to take off, and Jonas sucked in a sigh of relief, a man wearing jeans' goose-down coat came running, spotted the only empty seat left, and plopped down next to Jonas. After the man sat down in his coat and scarf, he introduced himself, looked around, and proudly stated that he was going to Florida. After relaxing, the man turned to Jonas. "Where you going in Florida?" The man with the heavy coat and boots questioned Jonas after looking him up and down, searching for a friendly face. Jonas didn't give him what he'd hoped for. Jonas wasn't friendly, and neither was he distant. He just wanted quiet and peace. "We have a long way to go. Just trying to make a friend before we travel over 2,000 miles. It's better to be friends because that's a long way to be this close and not talk." He extended his hand to Jonas. "Name's Grayland." Jonas took his hand with a hard handshake. "That's some kind of handshake you've got there." Jonas looked him over. When the man with the brownish thick hair shrugged off his coat and then hat, Jonas glanced at him. He had been smaller than Jonas thought, nevertheless he had wide shoulders. Kind of stocky and tall. Maybe 6 feet. "You don't talk much, do you?" "Not much." "The name's Jonas." He extended his hand in hopes that would be the end of the conversation. Jonas turned to look out at the passing scenery. But like the man said, 2,000 miles was a long way not to talk to anyone, especially someone so close. After 1,000 miles and stops at more bus stations than he could count, Jonas reevaluated his idea to travel by bus. He'd made up his mind quick, as he'd been known to do, and followed his mind. "I'm getting off at the next stop." The man turned to him. "Is it something I did?" "No, you were what I called a sterling passenger. When I didn't want to talk, you didn't. You respected my wishes and my space. I just don't think that this kind of travel is for me. I should go to the local car dealership and buy a car." "You can do that. Just buy yourself a car, pay cash?" "Yes." "Do you know the name Blackstone?" Jonas didn't know if he should use his last name, but the guy put up with him and gave his full name. He thought the neighborly thing to do was to tell him his. Jonas had never been neighborly, he'd just been a loner. Maybe a change would do him some good, he thought. "You're not telling me that your name is Blackstone?" "The Blackstone. I'm Jonas Blackstone, and the name you saw plastered on buildings from the west coast to the east coast that has the Blackstone name is because of my brother Maximilian. But just because he's rich doesn't make you rich. I'm not as rich as Max, but I can buy a new car if I want. Do you care to take a ride with me?" "Fuck yeah, if you let me help you drive." "Sure. I was hoping you said that. Since we're going to Miami, what kind of car do you think I should get?" Jonas questioned. "You're asking me." "Why not?" Jonas laughed. "What about a convertible? I've always fancied driving a convertible Corvette." "Let's go get that yellow Corvette." When the bus stopped at the next station, the two friends climbed off the bus, and in less time it took for paperwork, Jonas had a yellow Corvette headed for Miami, Florida. I never knew people who could buy a car just like that. My family worked our horse ranch and barely had enough money left over after breaking horses to buy a car, with all the money between us. Graylin turned to Jonas. What are you planning on doing once you get to Miami? Just lie on the beach and chill. Maybe open a bar after I get bored sitting around. And you, what are your plans? Get myself a job of some kind. Anything is better than doing what I've been doing. I've broken my back, legs, and arms. That weather in Montana just about killed me. If the horses didn't, the weather would, so I packed it in and told my mother that I'd rather die in the sun than get broken up by a horse and have her to take care of me. Jonas glanced over at Graylin. When I'm ready, what do you say you come and work for me? Do you know anything about bars? Jonas asked. Only that I can drink anyone under the table on a Saturday night. Well, you're hired, my friend. At least you can recognize when someone has had too much to drink, Jonas chuckled. Graylin made Jonas laugh, and that had been in short supply lately. Are you serious, Jonas? Don't I look like a serious man? Sometimes, Graylin said, raising an eyebrow and smiling. As Graylin drove into Miami, Jonas glanced over and asked, Where are you staying? I have a sister. She left the ranch to go to college and never came back. She's my older sister. And you're how old, Graylin? 25. My sister is 45. That makes her too old for you. And she has a husband. Well, the age doesn't put me off, it's the husband. The two had a laugh, and before they drove up to Graylin's sister's house, they exchanged phone numbers. I'll text you if you haven't found work, and maybe you can manage my bar for me. Is that a promise, Jonas? A promise. I'll be in touch. Jonas helped Graylin take out his 2 pieces of luggage from the Corvette. They smiled and shook hands before Graylin brought Jonas in for a hug. I'll be seeing you, my friend, Jonas said, clearing his throat. Jonas had never had a friend before. Only Max, his brother, and Alex. Max was more of a brother than a friend. Max watched over him and told him when he'd fucked up, which was all the time. That wasn't a friend's job. He considered Alex a friend because she never judged him. Max was more of a protector. He'd protected Jonas since he'd gotten out of the army and proceeded to get into all kinds of trouble. Jonas only had the men in his platoon who were friends and brothers. They watched each other's back the way Max watched over Jonas, but there were only 2 men left out of his 16 band of brothers when their deployment was up. He'd lost touch with the other man. After stepping into his Corvette, he turned to see Graylin ringing the bell, and then a woman in her early 40s, or who he thought was Graylin's sister, opened the door and gave him a big hug before ruffling his hair like Graylin was a little boy. When they disappeared into the house, Jonas turned on the motor and zoomed off into the direction of the beach. He'd rented a house on the beach before he'd left Montana, but never revealed that to Alex for fear she'd tell Max. He wanted to stay off the grid for a while, and then when he'd settled down, he'd let them know where he lived. Maybe have them up to visit with the children. That was his plans, but as the adage goes, the best laid plans of mice and men tend to go astray. Pulling into the driveway of his newly rented home, he glanced around, heard the ocean waves as his Corvette came to a stop in front of this beautiful 1-story place. It appeared larger than he'd wanted, and now he had to hire someone to clean it, which he didn't want to do. But it became necessary when he entered and saw that it was enormous, and there was no way he could manage the place alone. Jonas didn't bother to ask about the square footage. He didn't know or cared at the time about things like that. He just wanted to get away, and get as far away from Maximilian. He had a lot to prove to Max and Alex, and there was no better place or time than to do it in Miami. After taking his backpack out of the car, He did a walk-through of the house to see where everything was. The fridge was empty, and he had to get some groceries. He'd been tired and searched his phone for a pizza delivery and found it. But in the meantime, it would be pizza and cola. Jonas hadn't drank liquor in a year, and he wasn't about to break his months of sobriety. He'd sworn off alcohol. When he mentioned to Max that he'd be leaving and had plans to open a bar, Max warned him about being around liquor. "You haven't been free of all that shit that went on at your bondage club, and now you want to open a bar? Are you out of your fucking mind, Jonas?" Those words were bitter in his ear and worked to fuck up his mind, but he'd been determined to prove Max wrong. "You of all people, Max, should have some confidence in me. I've gotten in trouble not because I drank, but because I opened those bondage clubs. I can't see how that should have affected you." "It affected me because you got Alex involved in your fucking shit. I could have lost her because of you. I don't blame her, I blame you. She was only trying to help my poor confused brother." "I'm not confused, Max. I know what I want to do. I have to make a place for myself, and I can't do that with you cleaning up behind me." "For fuck's sake, Jonas, I have always cleaned up your mess. I can't have a life because of you. I have a family, and what did you do? You had a chance with Crystal and your child, but you fucked that up by getting into all kinds of shit in New York. Do you know what I had to do to get you out of that mess? Do you realize I could have lost the mother of my children with your criminal behavior? I didn't set out to do this. I know I've done some things in my life, but I never killed anyone except in war." "You never killed anyone? Then why did you enlist in the army and re-enlist? You had money, you weren't like the other men in your platoon who got themselves killed because they didn't have another choice. You had everything, and you managed to fuck that up, and that's why I want you to leave before you fuck up my family." Those were the last bitter words coming from Max's mouth last week. Jonas felt as if Max had been in this house with him. Jonas plopped down on the sofa and flicked on the large television hanging over the fireplace. What the fuck do they need a fireplace in Miami for anyway? He thought. Jonas chuckled. This had been the second laugh he'd had in a long time. Just as he flicked the channel and kicked off his shoes, the bell rang. He opened the door to see a young blonde man, 18 or 19, standing holding a pizza box and a large bottle of cola. Pulling the money out of his jeans, he handed him a generous tip, along with the price of the pizza and Coke. When the teen thanked him and turned to walk away, Jonas asked, "Do you live around here?" "In the area, but not these homes. My family can't afford the rent." "Do you know the name of the nearest supermarket that delivers?" "Sure." He wrote the name of the market for Jonas. Then the delivery guy said, "This is a lot of home for one man. Are you expecting your family?" "I'm single." "Oh, a bachelor. Dude, you're in the right place. The beach is crawling with beautiful women looking for a handsome dude with money. I'm not looking for anything or anyone. I came here to rest." "Well, good luck." Jonas dismissed what the guy said and carried the pizza and cola to the kitchen, ate his pizza and watched the sports channel until he fell asleep. It had been the first time he'd slept this peacefully in months. Maybe even a year. For some reason he couldn't sleep at Max and Alex's place. Maybe it was the children and all the animals around that had him anxious. Maybe it was Max with his judgmental eyes and words that made him uneasy all the time. He no longer had to look at Max, but he wished he could see Alex. Maybe FaceTime with her and the children, he thought. When Jonas woke, it was to a loud scream, "What the fuck?" he said, and dashed through the house, through the patio doors, and into the garden to see a man arguing with a young woman. Chapter 5. Jonas peered over a hedge and got a clear view of a young beautiful woman about 25, with long dark hair. The man she'd appeared to be arguing with had to be in his late 30s or 40. Jonas couldn't be sure in that dim light. The 40-something man had been attractive with gray on the sides of his temples that Jonas could see. He could see that the man had the pretty woman by her arms, shaking her. Jonas didn't know what to do, but he'd learned to mind his own business unless the man was trying to harm her, but it didn't look like that was the case with the two of them. When the argument died down, Jonas headed for the house and into the bedroom for a shower. After his shower he listened for noise, but there were none, so he fell across the California king bed and slept until the sun peeked through the shutters. After coffee, Jonas dressed and went for a walk on the beach. When he looked in front of him, he was coming face to face with the same woman he'd seen across the hedge. As she neared him, she smiled and then stopped. He kept walking. "Thank you." Jonas stopped, turned and said, "Were you talking to me?" "Yes." They were facing each other, and Jonas could see that she was a stunning dark-haired beauty, and much younger than he thought. She had to be no more than 18, but she looked at a glance as if she was 20. "Did you have a problem with your father last night?" "He's not my father. He's my lover." "Oh. I'm sorry." And Jonas started to walk away. "Don't be sorry. I saw you staring at us and was glad that you didn't intervene. I didn't mean for it to get out of hand, but sometimes he wants me to do things that I don't feel like doing." "I know what you mean." Jonas was just being polite. He didn't want to know exactly what it was she didn't want to participate in. He'd been around, and he'd known the signs and saw them. A young woman and older man. The woman getting involved with a man because of his money. And he looked as if he had enough to command her attention. This man had to be like Jonas, although the woman didn't know the kind of man Jonas was. He was handsome and rich. However, Jonas wasn't as old as the man, and he didn't have this beautiful woman to call his own, and in that way Jonas envied that man. "Do you really know what I mean?" She glared at Jonas with amber eyes, flicked her dark silky long hair to the side. "Care to go for a swim?" "Not now. I'm not dressed for an early morning swim." "I didn't mean now. Tonight." "What about tonight?" "My name is Brooke, and yours?" Jonas paused before he would give his name. "Jonas." Brooke inched closer to him. "Jonas? That's it. I don't like to give my surname." "You're not a fugitive, are you?" "No. I don't think so. I haven't had time to check." Brooke chuckled. "I like you. You make me laugh. So will you swim with me tonight? Should I say skinny dip? Won't your boyfriend mind?" "He'll be busy tonight." "What time?" 9 o'clock is good," Brooke said. "Then 9 it is." Jonas and Brooke stared at each other for a moment, and a smile crossed their faces at the same time. Then Jonas turned to jog away, and for some unsuspecting reason he shouted, "You're beautiful." He knew nothing about this woman, but she captivated him. Was it her youth? Not really, because he had many young women before her. Maybe it was her apparent innocence combined with a boldness. Or maybe she'd reminded him of someone he'd loved dearly. Jonas trotted away, proud and confident, anticipating what tonight would bring. Time wasn't passing fast enough, so Jonas decided to get some chores done. He needed clothes for the warm weather, and he needed groceries. Instead of getting them delivered, he decided to go to the market. On leaving the market, he passed a strip mall, and there on the outside, a large sign, "For sale or rent." Jonas drove into the mall and looked around. It was just what he needed. Large enough for a club. Not the kind he once had, but more of a bar that served drinks and maybe food. He wrote down the number and called from his car. "I'm inquiring about the property at this strip mall. It says for sale or rent. I'm the owner's secretary, and I manage some of his properties. Let me see." She paused a moment, as if she was checking which one Jonas wanted. "The property belongs to Mr. Cartwright, and it's not for rent. He'd like to see the whole complex sold, if you're interested." "I have to get back to you." And Jonas hung up. He had to think about it. Was he going to be in Miami long? It all depended on Brooke. He'd been attracted to her the minute he saw her standing almost nude with her boyfriend. After returning home, he had time to consider whether he'd purchase the property or not, on his drive along the beach highway. However, he needed some extra money. The money he'd gotten from Max had to go only so far, and it didn't include making any more investments. He had to leave his club in New York because it had been overtaken by some shady characters, like the lawyers he'd hired to go over his books and receipts. They'd failed to pay the taxes, and everyone who could get a piece of his bondage club, after the IRS got their portion, got more than their share. Jonas never thought anything over, and it appeared he never learned his lesson. He called the only person who he thought could help him. This time, he wasn't asking Alex for her help, after she and Max got him out of the last shitstorm he gotten Alex and himself in. This time, it would be different. He just needed a little advance, because he knew he could make the bar profitable. It was small enough for him to control, and he could lease out the remainder of the property. Jonas scrolled through his phone, looking for Alex's number, and hit the green button. "Alex, can you talk?" "Oh, Jonas. I was thinking about you. I miss you, and the children miss you." "What about Max? Does he miss me?" "He loves you, Jonas." "That's not what I asked. Does Max miss me?" There was a long silence. "I guess you answered my question. I called because you're the one person who never let me down, and believed in me." Another long pause, as Alex wondered what Jonas was ready to ask her, and she'd been ready to tell him no. But could she ever tell him no? "I need some money." "Sure, Jonas, how much do you need?" She'd failed that test. "I don't know, but you can't tell Max." "I said that I would never do what I'd done before. You of all people know just how destructive it was to hide things from him." "You don't have to hide from Max, just don't tell him." "Don't you have money?" "I'd almost forgotten I'd received money from my mother after her death." "Yes, I do." "Would you consider lending me something?" "I don't know how much it is until I speak to the owner, but I want to buy some property here in Miami Beach. I can't go on asking Max and have him scrutinize everything I do. I'm 35 fucking years old. And Max is a controlling fuck. You know that, Alex." Alex did know, and that's why she empathized with Jonas. "I'll lend it to you." "Don't worry, Alex, you'll get it back with dividends." "I'm not worried, Jonas. I just worry about my family, and you're part of that family. I don't want anything to happen to you. I need you to be alive and happy. Then I'm happy." "Another thing, Alex. I met someone. Her name is Brooke. I'll fill you in on it, but right now I have a date to meet her on the beach. Call you tomorrow and tell you all about her, and tell you when and where you can wire the money."